Hello and welcome to this special report, The Showdown. I'm Cleo and I'm joined by my co-host Pat, and you're listening to Ra Radio, Egypt's best community radio station. How are you, Pat?
I'm well, thank you, Cleo, and I'm very intrigued by what we're going to see. In this first episode of The Showdown, we're going to bring you up to speed with what's brought us to this situation. Those grubby little Hebrews have an upstart new leader, Moses, who has asked Pharaoh to let them go into the desert to worship their God. As if we'd fall for that.
I wonder if Moses can remember the way to the palace, as he was the adopted son to one of the old Pharaoh's daughters. What a way to repay such kindness he's been shown to make such demands.
Quite right, Cleo. But our Pharaoh has shown that he's no pushover. If those Hebrews have got enough time to complain, well, they've got enough time, obviously got too much time on their hands. Rather than the Egyptians doing the back-breaking work of getting the straw for their nice pleasant job of making bricks, Pharaoh has ordered the Hebrews to get in their own straw. What a wise ruler Pharaoh is.
Yes, Pat. I thought that might have been the last straw for the Hebrews, and they get rid of this troublemaker Moses, but he's still around. He even seems to be getting worse. And that's what's brought us to the showdown. Moses, declaring himself to be a representative of the God of the Hebrews, hasn't taken no for an answer and is daring to oppose Pharaoh, who is the very embodiment of the god Horus.
Not only that, Cleo, but it appears that Moses has the gall, has the audacity to challenge our other gods too. We'll hear more about these blows, these plagues, which our country, our people, and our gods have been enduring in the next episode of The Showdown.
Welcome to another episode of our special report, The Showdown, and welcome, Pat. I'm glad you could join me. As we mentioned last episode, our country and our gods have indeed been enduring some nasty blows. I have a report here that the first blow came when Moses rudely interrupted Pharaoh on his morning trip to the Nile, saying that the God of the Hebrews demanded their release to be able to worship him. Moses said, and I quote, "This is what the Lord says. By this you will know that I am the Lord. With this staff that is in my hand, I will strike the water of the Nile, and it will be changed to blood. The fish in the Nile will die, and the river will stink. The Egyptians will not be able to drink its water."
And it was terrible, Cleo. This place smelt worse than the south end of a northbound hippopotamus. This was obviously an attack on Hapi, the god of the Nile inundation. However, our wonderfully talented magicians were able to conjure up a similar effect, and so Pharaoh wasn't letting the Hebrews go anywhere.
Yes, our magicians are powerful, and they were able to reproduce the next plague which the Lord of the Hebrews brought upon us, that of frogs. Having a frog in your bed or jumping into the bread you're kneading isn't fun. Those frogs were everywhere. You might say we were knee-deep in frogs.
Very clever, Cleo. Unfortunately for Hecate, our fertility god, this was no laughing matter. With a head of a frog, she was the clear target of this insult. Fortunately, the frogs are now gone. Yes, the frogs left after Pharaoh asked Moses to pray to his God to take them away, but they did leave at the time that Pharaoh asked, and so I'm sure Pharaoh was right to let the Hebrews not to let the I believe that Pharaoh was right not to let the Hebrews leave, despite some reports which have claimed that he had earlier promised that they could leave once the frogs were gone.
Despite their ungratefulness, it's good for the Hebrews to be kept nice and safe with us. Unfortunately, there has been another blow, a plague of gnats. With these gnats looking like the dust of the earth, it may be that this is a blow to Geb, our god of the earth. I'm a little concerned though, Pat. Is it true that this plague could not be reproduced by our magicians?
Well, Cleo, there is an unconfirmed report that a magician told Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." But if Pharaoh isn't worried, then I don't think we have any cause for concern either. That concludes this episode of The Showdown, and we're going to hear a word from our sponsors. You should pay attention to them because we pay attention to you.
Welcome back to another episode of The Showdown, and welcome back to my co-host, Pat. Since we last met, more blows have befallen our people, our land, our pharaoh, and our gods.
Yes, Cleo. After our last episode, Pharaoh's morning routine was again rudely interrupted by Moses, claiming to represent the God of the Hebrews in calling for them to be released. This time, Pharaoh was threatened with a plague of flies. Some people are concerned that the very God of creation and rebirth, Khepri, was the target of this blow because Khepri has the head of a fly.
This is concerning, Pat, but I'm also a little bit worried that the plagues now seem to be more targeted. I have a quote of Moses reporting the words of the God of the Hebrews to Pharaoh. But on that day I will deal differently with the land of Goshen, where my people live. No swarms of flies will be there, so that you will know that I, the Lord, am in this land. I will make a distinction between my people and your people. I'm hearing reports that this has been happening. People other than the Hebrews, even some Egyptians, are now listening to Moses.
I wouldn't worry, Cleo. We all know that Pharaoh, the embodiment of Horus, and our other gods will protect us. After all, Pharaoh has been able to keep the Hebrews under our control, under our care and protection, despite Moses' attempts to take them out into the dangerous wilderness. These blows are just petty insults.
Yes, Pharaoh has been able to keep the Israelites nice and safe. But there have been a few people who have questioned what it means for him to make promises to let them go, only to then change his mind. Some of our listeners may also be a little concerned by the protections offered by our gods, when the very goddess of love and protection, Hathor, who has the head of a cow, was the target of the plague upon all our cattle, a plague which didn't impact the cattle and animals of the Hebrews.
Cleo, such comments are probably not helpful for our listeners. And may I remind you that some of our listeners are rather important people? As for the goddess of love and protection, Hathor, being targeted, it's important to remember that, sorry, Cleo, I'll come back to you, but we're hearing a report that, without even warning Pharaoh, that Moses has instructed his brother Aaron to take a handful of soot from the furnace and throw it up into the air. People are saying that, oh my goodness, festering boils are being seen on people and animals.
Pat, it's starting here too. I'm so itchy. Why couldn't Isis, the goddess of medicine and peace, protect us? Even our magicians are so unclean with festering boils. They're not going before Pharaoh. How come we're not hearing any reports of the Hebrews or their animals getting sick from this? People want answers, Pat.
I know you're hurting, Cleo, and I'm sure Pharaoh will give us the right answer when he wants to. We all know that Pharaoh is better than Moses, because Pharaoh will want to give us a full answer. He'll need some time to get all the information, and so we'll wrap up this episode here. As we conclude this episode of The Showdown, we're going to put on a song and give you the chance to ring in with your donations to keep this community radio station on air. Thank you for your supporting of Radio Ra, where we practice impartial and balanced reporting.
Welcome back to another episode of The Showdown. The gods of the Egyptians have taken even more blows since we last spoke. To start with, Nut, the goddess of the sky, took a blow, as massive and terrible hailstones, the worst in our history, smashed down upon the land, killing animals and destroying plants.
Now, Cleo, do you think that this was a blow against Nut, or was Nut simply displaying her power?
Pat, are you trying to say that Nut attacked her own people? Alternatively, are you saying that Nut was opposing the goddess of Hathor, who, as we remember from last episode, has the head of a cow? Also, don't you think that Moses declaring that this would happen to Pharaoh and even giving him the opportunity to rescue his cattle by bringing them under cover means that the God of the Hebrews is behind this? After all, Pat, even Pharaoh himself admitted he was in the wrong about this. A palace official reported, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron. "This time I have sinned," he said to them. "The Lord is in the right, and I and my people are in the wrong. Pray to the Lord, for we have had enough thunder and hail. I will let you go. You don't have to stay any longer."
That's all well and good, Cleo, but Pharaoh didn't let them go, and Pharaoh is always right, so I think that settles the argument. And anyway, there's some question as to which of our gods this blow was supposed to be aimed at. While I agree that it was likely to be Nut, the goddess of the sky, there is also Seth, the god of storms and disorder.
Yes, Pat. But after the hailstorm, we had a plague of locusts, which came down on the wind. So it is probable that Seth had received his blow from that plague. The locusts came in on strong wind, so there's your storm, and they have thrown our entire economy and livelihoods into disorder. What are the Egyptians supposed to do now that the crops which survived the hail have now been eaten by locusts?
Cleo, this is not the time to be giving up hope or feel like we're defeated. I'm very concerned for your tone. Pharaoh has tried to be reasonable all the way along. Pharaoh knows how tough it is outside of Egypt and wanted to protect the Hebrew children and women from this, but he did permit the men to leave. It's not Pharaoh's fault if Moses is so stubborn. In fact, I wonder why the Hebrews kept persisting. If the God of the Hebrews could really do something bad to our king, don't you think he would have done it at the start rather than delaying the departure of the Hebrews?
That is a good question, Pat. I think many in Egypt are asking the same question, particularly in light of reports I've heard from the palace. Apparently, Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said to him, "This is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says. How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go so that they may worship me." So why didn't the God of the Hebrews unleash everything on Pharaoh at once? There are people with contacts on both sides who tell me that the God of the Hebrews, who uses the title Yahweh or I Am, has actually been merciful to Pharaoh and the people of Egypt, and giving Pharaoh every opportunity to let the Hebrews go before things got too bad. There's also no denying that many in Egypt, not just the Hebrews and other foreigners, but even Egyptians, are saying that the God of the Hebrews is powerful and awesome and is obviously present in Egypt in power. Pat, there are people turning to Yahweh and putting their trust in him.
I think that's unwise talk there, Cleo. Let's not be foolish or rash. We still have Pharaoh, the embodiment of Horus, the son of the sun god, Ra. And anyway, sorry, what's this? We have a breaking report. Darkness! Darkness has come upon Egypt. This is a darkness that can be felt. The darkness is impacting us on our station here now too. Oh, what calamity for the sun god Ra to take such a blow. I'm continuing to hear reports from the palace. Apparently, our caring Pharaoh has offered the Hebrews to leave, only needing to leave behind their flocks and herds. But the stubborn Moses has rejected such a generous offer. Oh dear, quotes are coming in. Pharaoh said to Moses, "Get out of my sight. Make sure you do not appear before me again. The day you see my face, you will die." "Just as you say," Moses replied. "I will never appear before you again." With this shocking development, we need to end this episode. I suggest you speak to a loved one. Tell them what's on your mind. Hello, listeners. Welcome to this special update from the Showdown. I'm Pat, and you're listening to Radio Ra, the best community radio station in Egypt. I'm hosting this update alone tonight because Cleo has called in to say that she needed to go and visit a neighbour. Such a caring person is Cleo. Here, let me ask our producer something. Did Cleo say where her neighbour lives? I'll give them a call out. Oh, in Goshen, you say? Isn't that where the Hebrews live? No, I won't give them a call out. I wouldn't want to embarrass Cleo or her neighbours. To bring you up to speed, listeners, in our previous episode we heard that how the God of the Hebrews had laid blows against a number of our gods. Hapi, the god of the Nile inundation, Hecate, the goddess of fertility and water, Geb, the god of the earth, Khepri, the god of creation, Hathor, the goddess of love and protection, Isis, the god of medicine and peace, the goddess of medicine and peace, Nut, the goddess of the sky, Seth, the god of storms and disorder, and most recently, Ra, the god of the sun. While some, even some Egyptians, have come to believe that the God of the Hebrews is more powerful than our gods, we know that Pharaoh, the embodiment of Horus, is the real power in Egypt. Tonight, though, is a night of high tension. Though through the day we have heard reports that the Hebrews have been asking the Egyptian neighbors for articles of silver and gold. Not only have the Egyptians been happy to give them over to the Hebrews, it appears that some Egyptians may even be joining them. On top of this, I received this report from the palace earlier today of Moses speaking to Pharaoh. Moses said, "This is what the Lord says. About midnight I will go throughout Egypt. Every firstborn son in Egypt will die, from the firstborn son of Pharaoh who sits on the throne to the firstborn son of the female slave who is at her handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle as well. There will be wailing throughout Egypt, worse than there has ever been or ever will be again. But among the Israelites not a dog will bark, not or at any person or animal. Then you will know that the Lord makes a distinction between Israel and Egypt. All these officials of yours will come to me, bowing down before me and saying, 'Go, you and all the people who follow you.' After that I will leave." Then Moses, hot with anger, left Pharaoh. We really have reached the showdown, dear listeners. But there's nothing to be concerned about. Moses has not only threatened every household in Egypt, but has directly challenged Pharaoh by including the son of Pharaoh himself. Pharaoh, the embodiment of Horus, will not stand for this, and so we can be assured that Pharaoh will finally act and show himself to be greater than this Yahweh or I am or whatever name the God of the Hebrews wants to use. In fact, there have been reports of major activity among the Hebrews' homes. Not only have they been visiting their Egyptian neighbors, but it looks like they're planning on quite a meal tonight, and have been putting some sort of celebratory paint over their door frames. If that doesn't tell you that they're not planning on going anywhere, I don't know what does. No one redecorates their homes just before leaving. No, I can't see the Israelites going anywhere. Well, that brings us to this end of this special update of the Showdown. I'll join you tomorrow for a full episode of the Showdown, where I'm sure we'll enjoy talking quite a bit about how Pharaoh finally dealt with that troublesome Moses. Enjoy this song, which I'm leaving you with. Farewell.